Second part of this session always centered on artistic and literary we already done, but artistic representation of the Republic of Genoa and art in the construction of the Republican discourse with the paper of Professor George Gorse, who is Professor of Art History and Chair of Art History at Pomona College, California. He has been visiting fellow at ITATI, the Harvard University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies, at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and at the Bogliasco Research Institute in Genoa. His research interest includes Italian Renaissance and Baroque art and architecture, history of palaces, villas, and gardens, history of medieval and early modern urban spaces. He specialized in the history of Genoese art between the 11th and the 17th century, publishing several essays, for instance, on the triumphal entries in Genoa during the 16th century, on the iconographical representation of Andrea Doria, and also on the urban architecture of medieval Genoa. Today, he will give us a paper titled A Royal Republic, the Virgin Mary as Queen of Genoa in 1737, dealing with an issue which has a fundamental significance with our conference. We already talked a little bit of this yesterday. That is the representation of the Republic of Genoa as a sort of royal state. Thank you very much and very warm welcome to Professor Gorse. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Enrico, and for everyone who's organized this wonderful conference. And thank you very much for the invitation. I wanted to say that Piero Boccardo and Claudia Di Fabio are great friends, and El Siglo dello Genovese in the Palazzo Ducale in 1999 was my introduction to this. And it's a nice opportunity for me to get into the 17th century, as most of my work is on the 15th century, 16th century with Andrea Doria. And throughout the years, this has been a back burner kind of project. And I have greatly benefited from Naomi Salson Gorse, who's an art historian of modern art with Marcel Duchamp, and a great researcher. And we have been in the archives and the Biblioteca Barrio and so forth. In the spring of 2018, we were there for 7 months during a sabbatical. And this paper comes out of this. And thanks for the opportunity to add to what Claudia Di Fabio and others have already written. And it's dedicated to the memory of Ezia Gavazza, which we lost last summer, a dear friend to us all, a mentor to us all. And she is truly La Regina di Genova. Ezia. Through the triumphal facade of the Cathedral of San Lorenzo, down the long processional black and white marble nave, to the classical illuminated dome crossing and scenic choir, from medieval commune to Renaissance Republic of Andrea Doria, dark into light. The biennial doge in very serene colleges presented a crown, scepter, and keys to the portable ceremonial polychrome wood sculpture of the crowned Virgin Mary and Child in heaven, with scroll inscription, Et Rege Eos, and rule them, from King David's Psalms 27:8-9, on the high altar in a solemn state mass on the feast day of the Annunciation, March the 25th, 1637. With this communal offering, a republic became a monarchy, and a new civic iconography, a state ritual and representation were born, represented in the vital Genoese trading colony churches of Spanish Habsburg, Naples, and Palermo on left and right. Many scholars have interpreted this rededication as a direct response to military, political, and economic crisis with the Savoy War of 1625-26, part of the devastating 30 Years' War leading up to the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, and the building of the new city walls in 1626-37 to the mountaintops, enclosing and protecting the natural harbor city. This paper adds 2 points or proposals to this analysis. First, that the crescent shape of Genova itself represents the crescent or globe of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary, the state iconography of Spain and its world empire, to which Genova was allied. And second, beyond the portals, the walls themselves represented the sacred belt, la Sacra Cintura of the Virgin Mary, protector of the Royal Republic of Genoa, now claiming equal status to rival principalities, Turin and kingdoms. The new walled city of Genoa embodied the Virgin Mary as Empress, Queen, and Governor of the Republic and all of its states, according to the rededicatory ceremony of March the 25th, 1637. During the 15th and 16th centuries, the theology of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary, rooted in the elevation of the Virgin Mary to Theotokos, Mother of God, at the Council of Ephesus in 431 under Byzantine Emperor Theodosius II, and promoted by the Franciscans in the 13th century, became a state iconography of Spain, particularly in Sevilla, in the south of Iberia, in direct contact with its Muslim lunar calendar culture after the Reconquista in 1492. A debate ensued whether the crescent moon should be upward or downward, in which Francisco Pacheco, Renaissance theorist and teacher of Velázquez and others, argued for the latter in his Arte de la Pintura, published in Sevilla in 1649. Quote, especially with the moon, I have followed the learned opinion of Father Luis de Alcazar, who says, painters usually show the crescent moon upside down at the feet of this mother, of this woman. But as is obvious to learned mathematicians, if the moon and sun face each other, both points of the moon have to point downward. Thus the woman will stand on a convex instead of a concave surface. This is necessary so that the moon, receiving its light from the sun, will illuminate the woman standing on it, unquote. Like Artemis Diana of Ephesus, the Virgin Mary on crescent moon, a new beginning after the new moon, faces and reflects the sun, Jupiter, Christ, theologically, but also optically and mathematically, according to Pacheco's Renaissance art theory. And you see this downward motion in a minority of the Immaculata, which suggests the universal globe under her feet as well. With this in mind, it is suggestive to interpret the Madonna della Città as a complex hybrid, but integrated image of the crowned Virgin and Child in heaven over Genova, her sacred royal entry city, and the Immaculata, her immaculate birth, with Genova as the downward crescent moon or globe, incorporating her encyclopedic image iconography as divine ruler, protector, and intercessor, the Church. So familiar to medieval and Renaissance Genova, sacred foundation myths as a major entry port into Italy, Paradiso. In the case of Zurbaran of 1630, on the left, the Virgin Mary is at once from left to right, top to bottom, Porta Coli, portal of heaven, and Jacob's ladder, stairway to heaven, at her head, which guard, open, and ascend the firmament. At her heart, ivory tower or closed temple, and spotless mirror, speculum sine macula, which reflect her pure spiritual being. At her hips, Stella Maris, first morning star of the seas, and shadowy face of the moon that guide the sublunar earthly realm. And like a predella narrative altar frieze beneath her feet, the Virgin's role as protector of sailors, that is, pilgrims, seekers of faith, hope, salvation, journey of the soul, ship of state or church, navicella, is represented by the caravel sailing across the serene waters of divine fortune, from nature and landscape with palm tree of salvation to the fortified city of God, Augustine's Civitas Dei, with entry gate, domed temple, and Tower of David, Turris David, a guiding lantern above, a new Jerusalem. These repeat her celestial attributes with other gendered virginal signs of hortus conclusus, closed garden, and living fountain, fons sapientiae, or fountain of divine wisdom, of a new celestial Jerusalem or Rome. From Jacobus de Voragine to Petrarch and many others, this pagan to Christian iconography is woven into the city, the very foundations of medieval and Renaissance Genoa. It is now embodied in the very fabric of a new walled Marian Genoa, the city as body. This is a global iconography, which you see on the left in an extraordinary example, now in a private collection in Mexico City, a late 16th century Japanese enamel triptych painted in Mexico, New Spain, in the mid 18th century, representing the miracles of indigenous peasant saint Juan Diego's visions in 1531, and the Virgin of the Andes over crescent moon on the right, representing the Tiwanakan Incan mountain earth goddess Pachamama on Lake Titicaca, island of the sun in Peru, modern Bolivia, part of the global gold and silver and slave trade across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. From the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico City to the Black Virgin of Extremadura in España, without crescent moon, but with dark Moorish complexion. This represented a crusading history from medieval Reconquista to Renaissance global empire. Plus ultra, more beyond. And here I cannot resist including Montorceli's monumental sculpture of Andrea Doria as a Roman admiral, a new Augustus over the Mediterranean, Mar Nostrum, with Emperor Charles V's golden fleece of 1534 on his breastplate over Michelangelo's bound slave with crescent moon on his breastplate. This imperial iconography pervades the new civic iconography and ascent of the Virgin Mary over Baroque Genoa in the 17th and 18th centuries. Ultimately, this all goes back to the Virgin of the Apocalypse on crescent moon, triumphing over the whore of Babylon with the seven-headed dragon from St. John the Evangelist's book of Revelation. Salvation and damnation at the last judgment, eschatological time. In 1637, Alessandro Baratta published his monumental print view of Genoa with map of Liguria and Corsica, Il Regno at lower left, to commemorate the completion of the new ballistic fortress walls, a radiant crown over the city with royal court of patron saints at upper right, the luminous crowned Virgin Mary and Christ on crescent moon, with medieval institutional patron saints Lawrence and John the Baptist, and penitent Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, embracing instruments of the Passion, next to fame's trumpet banderole Libertas, voted by the Republic as a new French patron saint in 1625 at the beginning of the Savoy War. From then on, Bernard is everywhere, from the ceremonial staircase in the Palazzo Reale, formerly the Palazzo Ducale, beneath the Michelangelesque Carracci-inspired Trinità Pietà, triumphing over the devil, lurking in the balustrade next to the Loggia dei Alemanni, the Loggia of German Guards. And Libertas is on the globe there. To the foundation medal of the new walls, laid at the lantern in a solemn procession on December the 7th, 1626, the day before the feast day of the Immaculate Conception on December the 8th, to the Immaculata in ascent over patron saints on the monumental Albergo dei Poveri, built to crown Genoa after the catastrophic plague of 1655-56. A fresco tympanum, now faded, but known through Giovanni Battista Carlone's contemporary oil painting of this magnificent Baroque ascent. All of this was part of the change in civic to royal iconography after 1637, a watershed, reflected in Genoa's new royal currency at lower right. 2 years later, in 1639, a confraternity of the Sacred Belt of the Virgin Mary was formed at the Church of San Agostino, with a chapel and fresco dedicated to the Sacra Cintura, now lost. The confraternity published a crowned civic history with medieval guardian griffins of the cult and relics, with papal proclamations and privileges dedicated to the very serene Doge, most excellent governors, and most illustrious procurators of the Genoese Republic, just to highlight titles which are paramount throughout this period. On the second page of frontispiece, the crowned Virgin Mary and Christ extend the sacred belt to kneeling Saints Augustine and Monica below, originators of this sacred cult, who present a view of the lantern at center. And in the dedication pages that follow, the Sacra Cintura protects these Real Città from its enemies with enclosing walls, cinta, fortress terminology, her sacred belt or mantle, embracing the harbor city, her realm. One is reminded of Raphael's ascension and coronation of the Virgin Mary over her floral tomb with sacred belt held by St. Thomas, flanked by Roman Saints Peter and Paul, with John the Evangelist at right for the Odi family chapel in the Cathedral of San Francesco in Papal Perugia of 1502. In Fiozella's paintings, the walls rise up to touch at their pinnacle the angels beneath the silver basin with crown, scepter, and keys, offered to the crowned Virgin and Child in majesty et rege eos over sacred mountains and enclosed harbor basin. This is a royal sacred landscape from God's perspective, straight down. In the same divine perspective is featured in the Carte Geographicae of the Vatican Cortili de Belvedere, in which the Italian peninsula is represented in classical ambulatio with major city views and plans with inscriptions and allegorical figures displayed down the corridor, a kind of papal grand tour between palace and villa, in which rival Genoa and Venice framed the end portal in three-dimensional flat plan and bird's eye views. In 1633, Pope Urban VIII Barberini wrote to the Senate requesting two large paintings by Genoese artist Andrea Ansaldo di Voltri, one in plan and one bird's eye, of the city and new walls, a wonder of modern fortifications. The Nuove Mura became iconic of the entrance port city and republic after the Savoy War. With their completion in 1637, not only were the monumental rustic church-like city gates, Porta Laterna and Porta Pila, dedicated to the crowned Virgin Mary and Christ with inscription et rege eos, but the walls themselves were La Sacra Cintura, a protector against Savoy cannon, but also a corona of royal iconography and sovereignty. They stood with the monastic churches of Santa Maria della Guardia over Polcevere Valley to the west, and Nostra Signora della Monte over Bisagno to the east, as flanking sentinels over the city, part of Marian worship throughout Liguria. Now the Virgin Mary rose as a central figure in the Republic, Axis Mundi, embodying her royal character and status as a European capital in the world empire. And this is anticipated by Galeazzo Alessi's monumental dome church of Santa Maria Assunta of 1549 to 1602, a simulacrum of St. Peter's in Rome for the new noble merchant banking Cardinal Sauli family in their albergo in Carignano, defining the new Marian city. One thinks of parallels in other Italian cities, such as Siena after the Battle of Monteperti over Florence in 1260. Rival cults of the Virgin Mary and patron saints, relics and state rituals, with Duccio's Maestà altar with missing central pinnacle panel of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary beneath Cimaboe's stained glass window in the Cathedral of Santa Maria Assunta on the Bishop's Acropolis of Città. Or Simone Martini's Madonna and Child enthroned with patron saints presiding over the Grand Council Chamber, Palazzo Pubblico on the Campo, in the valley, her royal mantle and Roman theater. Or ex voto interventions to give thanks in times of crisis, such as Francisco de Giorgio's Bicerno treasury cover after the earthquake of January 1st, 1466. La Vergine della Misericordia, spreading her cloak over the city like the sky polis itself. Imperial icons of the Virgin Mary and Child as protectors of and on the city gates and walls of Constantinople during the 7th century, and Heraclius's defense of the capital and empire, first against the Persians and then Islam. This helps to understand later Byzantine imperial icons of the Maestà and urban amphitheater. The Madonna della Città defined the relationship between Genoa and its Regno, Corsica, but also its trading colonies in other Mediterranean cities, in particular Naples and Palermo, key to the Spanish viceroyal empire, its vital grain trade and military strategy. While these two altars are very similar, they differ in one significant way. The prominence given to the crown in San Giorgio dei Genovesi in Naples, like the new Dogal royal crowns of Genoa, different from the more subdued crown in Palermo, which might indicate and reflect the royal and colonial status of these two cities in the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily, a royal hierarchy in status, perhaps in the architecture too, on their respective harbor fronts. With the coronation of Agostino Pallavicino as Doge in 1637, the royal crown and scepter of the Virgin Mary took precedence, in contrast to Doge Jacopo Lomolino, Il Principe, at the beginning of the Savoy War, enthroned between Venus, Old Liguria, with her luxury, and Minerva Mars, with foot on a bull's head, Torino, a Cato early Roman Republican call to self-sacrifice on behalf of the Patria, a modern-day Ulysses triumphing over the furies and sirens of Circe and Circe. Throughout the coronation book of Agostino Pallavicino, given the scepter by ancient founder Janus and crowned by coral crown Corsica, Il Regno, that gives the status of kingdom to this republic. The panegyric orations dwell on the Augustan connotations of Agostino's name, an association with Pallas Athena, Minerva, goddess of reason and wisdom, Pallavicino. This represents a return to the Golden Age iconography of Andrea Doria in the 16th century, Augustan founder of the Republic and ruler of the Mediterranean, who refused the Dogal crown but controlled the city in his imperial seaside villa and state portraiture, his reign. You see this throughout Agostino Pallavicino's patronage and his Augustan promotion of royal iconography, sumptuous display and ceremony, from Cato to Augustus, a debate within the Republic, which might help to understand his magnificent senatorial portrait by Anthony van Dyck in the Getty of 1621, Rubensian image of Genoese nobility as representative of the Republic at the coronation of Pope Gregory XV Ludovisi in Rome. In 1653, a bronze sculpture of the crowned Virgin Mary and Christ with Et Rege Eos scroll inscription over a Herculean tasseled lion skin imprint of crescent-shaped Genoa was installed on the high altar of San Lorenzo, completing a 16-year odyssey of portable wood sculpture by Bassoni to permanent bronze installation of Bianco. Archbishop Stefano d'Orazio refused to preside at the coronation of the Virgin Mary as Queen of Genoa in 1631. Replaced by old noble Cardinal Giovanni Domenico Spinola, protector of the Genoese Republic at the papal court of Urban VIII. The Pope and his Archbishop, as well as the French and even Spanish, resisted these claims to precedence at the high altar or in statecraft, proclaiming that monarchies come from God, republics from the people. An extraordinary anticipation of the 18th century Enlightenment and age of revolution. Agostino Pallavicino was crowned in the Church of Santa Caterina of Genoa to the northeast and near the Strada Nuova, residence of the Pallavicino old noble family palaces. The Bassoni Madonna della Città was transported between San Lorenzo, Santa Caterina, and San Bernardo, a new church commissioned to the new patron saint after 1626 on Via San Bernardo, secularized and suppressed in the 19th century. In the ceremonial books of the Genoese Republic in the Archivio di Stato, the Jesuit church of San Andrea Ambrogio to the east of the cathedral became a second state cathedral, physically attached by a bridge to the Palazzo Reale for dogal ceremonies and feast day celebrations, an indication of the central Jesuit role in this Counter-Reformation development. 1653, institutionalized the Virgin Mary as Queen of Genoa, a royal republic, and contested iconography where she presides there today, recently restored magnificently. Thank you. We also want to give all of our auguri to Genova durante questo tempo molto duro, e in particolare i vittimi del ponte di Morandi e la ricostruzione del ponte e la nuova Genova dopo 1992. Bravo Genova, sempre siamo con voi, siamo con voi. Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gors, for this wonderful talk. Thank you also for this homage to the city of Genoa, which I think is very much appreciated. We really need it now. I think that your paper was really full of interesting points, and it was really didactic on the front of the use of political iconography. Very interesting, the first part on the considering iconographical use of the Virgin Mary as a queen of Genoa, and the iconography, the Spanish iconography of the Immaculada, and the use that in Genoa was made of the image of the Virgin Queen as a sign of political proximity to that Spanish politics of global empire. Very, very beautiful, very interesting. Also, that the image you have shown the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico and other parts of the New World. And then the second point, very, very interesting, was that, of course, of the walls. I think this interpretation of the new walls as the sacred belt of the Virgin Mary, which led us to better understand this project of making Genoa as a Marian city, and so consequently a royal city. And all the documents, because you do not analyze only iconographical sources, and this was really important of your paper. Also, the analysis of other elements, such as the oration for the incarnation of the Doge Pallavicino, the idea of this crown, the importance of this crown of Corsica, I think go strictly at the heart of our project. I think that there will be a lot of questions on this paper. Was really interesting. Also, the comparison of the two images of Doge Pallavicino by Van Dyck and Domenico Fiasella, but I think we will have a lot of time to pose you a lot of questions in the end. I want now to go to the second speaker of this afternoon, who is Sara Rulli, who got her PhD in history and conservation of artistic and architectural cultural heritage in 2012 at the University of Genova, where she currently teaches history of modern art and valorization of the territory. She is architect of the Italian Ministry for Cultural Heritage and Tourism, specialized in the architecture of villas and gardens in the Genoese territory during the 18th century. She is author of essays focused on the decoration of early modern villas and palaces, and on the historical landscape in Genoa and Liguria. Today, she will give us a paper titled Continuity and Renewal of the City Image, the Enhancement and Strengthening of Public Architectures and Infrastructure as an Instrument for Political Communication. Thank you very much, and very warm welcome to Sara Rulli. I give you the floor.
Good evening, and thanks, Enrico, for your kind presentation. My work is a part of the wide line of studies that has worked in the past decades on the city image. Studies that are mainly represented by the contribution of Ennio Poleggi and Lauro Magnani, and these studies today will guide my analysis. An analysis that wants to demonstrate the tightening unity between political thought, definition of urban spaces, public works, and the renewal of the city image in that years that covers the first half of the 17th century. A moment
I'm sorry to bother. We have some issues with volume, maybe. So just talk closer to the microphone, maybe. We can hear you, definitely. It's just about the volume of the microphone.
Yes,
thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
Wait a moment. My microphone is at maximum level.
It's already better right now.
It's better. Least. I can hear you better.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry again.
I have to demonstrate the tightening unity between political thought, definition of urban spaces, public works, and the renewal of the city image in that years that covers the first half of the 17th century, a moment in which a series of political and military events change radically the most active part of the Genoese aristocracy and a part of its political class. So in this period, some intellectuals and politicians, the so-called Novatori and Navalisti or Repubblicisti, planned to revitalize the city and the Republic and to turn them back into a naval and commercial power, taking its glorious medieval past as an example. A project that would have transformed the financial profile of a city which should have returned to being independent from both mercantile and maritime point of view. A desire for change that, however, has its roots since the second half of the 16th century. The proposal to relaunch Genoa as a naval power was thus intertwined, as we have seen, with the debate on the naval rearmament of the Republic, which was determined and conditioned by the ways in which, in 1528, Genoa had entered in the Spanish system. In this context, as Carlo Bitossi noted, while the supporters of the link with Spain never elaborated their own political manifesto, The opponents were very prolific in this sense, starting with the work of Monsignor Oberto Foglietta, Delle cose della Repubblica di Genova, published in Rome in 1559. The work was an attack on the internal political structure of the Republic that began with the question of the public fleet and compared the glorious medieval past of the city with the contemporary weakness and subordination. So, political institutional reform and naval relaunch were proposed to bring Genoa back to a central position on the international scene. An ambitious reform program that was carried out at the beginning of the 17th century by a group of aristocrats, politicians, and committed intellectuals, some of whom were partners of Anton Giulio Brignole Sale in the Accademia degli Addormentati, the main genius literary academy of the time, which Brignole Sale himself revitalized in the 30s of the 17th century. In this context, the naval rearmament was only the first stage of an overall renewal that the Republic had started earlier and which included a complex and extensive program of public works. A program which would have helped to relaunch the city and its independence, give a strong signal on the international scene, new walls, new aqueduct, and above all, new moles for a safer harbor would became the new landmarks of his new political course. Gio Bernardo Veneroso, in his Genio Ligure Risvegliato, the manifesto of the so-called naval movement, does write, in fact, in 1650. Solo ora i Serenissimi hanno saputo far a ciascheduno vedere la città più magnifica con superbi acquedotti, più forte con mura inespugnabili e più illustre con meravigliose moli nella profondità delle onde instabili, stabilmente fondate. So, the great public works carried out in Genoa in the 20s and 30s of the 17th century were immediately celebrated and recognized by citizens and contemporaries as a symbol of a regained republican dignity. Those construction sites and new artifacts also appeared in all those works, literary or graphics, that contributed to exalt the Republic and to represent the city. New fortification and a well-protected harbor appeared so immediately with perfect precision and topographical correspondence, even in those drawings and prints that would have promoted the image of the city inside and outside itself. Consolidated images which will be flanked by the inventiveness of Domenico Fiasella, who, studying the image that would have represented the city, now governed as a royal republic abroad, outside its walls, raised the point of view and represented a city clearly readable in his whole orography. An iconography whose success was immediate, and we have just seen with Giorgio Gors. It's not the case that Fiasella will also be the author of the Antiporta for Il Genio Ligure Risvegliato, where the presence of the Molo Nuovo will be clearly evident. So, these great public works were the new city walls, Le Mura Nuove, built between 1626 and 1632 and designed by the engineers and mathematicians Ansaldo De Mari and Giovanni Battista Bagliani, a member of Addormentati, under the coordination of the architect Bartolomeo Bianco. The new malls, Il Molo Nuovo, built between 1638 and 1644, after a very long debate aimed at evaluating a series of work initialized at repairing the harbor from the whirling attacks of the Libeccio wind. And here we are a testimonianza for the storm. A work that well reflected the entrepreneurial spirit of the Genoese, once again under the leadership of Ansaldo De Mari. In fact, a new molus, the Molo Nuovo, protected the Genoese harbor on the east side. Extended for a length of 375 meters, it was built thanks to a new technology derived from the latest studies on wave motion, which allowed to sink caissons full of lime stones and well-leveled stone bed. So, from 1640, the harbor was finally protected from storms, and it was possible to increase the anchorages for sugar, coffee, and cocoa. It was no coincidence that the work, as we have seen, was immediately inserted in the city images and in the Antiporta of the Genio Ligure Risvegliato. A protagonist, this new molo, that will be also present in the antiporta of other books that, in this period, exalt the city and its politic. It is present, in fact, in the work of Cornelius Blomart, after Gio Andrea Podestà, for De Dominio Serenissime Genuensis Republice in Mare Ligustico, written by Borgo in 1641. It's also interesting to note that in this first edition, the Molos is represented still under construction. In a second version, however, the plate of Blomart is retouched in order to represent the Molos concluded. The great public enterprise is still recalled in 1669 in the Antiporta engraved by Marcus Orozco for the Real Grandezza della Serenissima Repubblica di Genova, composed by Luis de Góngora. The third, but not least work to be built was the Calzolo Aqueduct, l'Acquedotto di Calzolo, completed in 1623, 18 miles long, developed through mountains and valleys under the coordination of the architect João Aicardo, also former designer of the public granaries of the city. This new branch of the aqueduct developed mainly outside the city walls along the Bisagno Valley. The complex technological solution applied allowed finally the rationalization and the strengthening also of the ancient branches of the aqueduct in the city. These branches, from this moment on, will always be present in the city views. For example, we can in fact see the great view of Alessandro Baratta that present some branches of the aqueduct just alongside the development of the new city wall, Le Nuova Mura. Image immediately received by other authors, such as Bastian Stupendal, in his bird's eye view, and the particular of the structure of the aqueduct. The Mura Nuove, the aqueduct, and the Molo Nuovo, like all the public and private works of the time, both urban and architectural, thus became the symbol of a new political course aimed at restoring a republican dignity that ensures the recovery and autonomy of maritime trade. The Mura Nuove, in particular, also attested that Genoa was stronger than ever. The construction of the new walls, in fact, had, as Claudio Costantini already noted in 1975, also the meaning of a commitment by the Republic to do it by itself, to rely mainly on its own forces for its defense, a strong symbol of independence. Works symbol of the renewals of the city, until that moment centered only on the buildings of Strada Nuova and Via Balbi, private buildings to which, however, the public works flanked and did not replace. In the concerted effort, there was, in fact, a message that it is interesting to clarify. Also, the wealth of individual citizens constituted the foundation of the power of the Republic, the great reserve of the public. Ove unione è forza, e non si tema miseria ove fortezza, wrote in fact Gio Vincenzo Imperiale, commenting the construction of the new walls, the Nuove Mura, but referring also to the unity of economic efforts and image of both institution and citizen. All public works that find concreteness so in the representation of the city. Pictorial and printed views that, if from one side, are inspired not by chance by the Wolgemut's engraving, and on the other side, expand their communication strategy, emphasizing the presence of the Molo Nuovo, the new city walls, of the aqueduct, and of the streets, which often appear exaggeratedly with, such as in the work of Gio Domenico Rossi, which will become a new prototype. The new view of Rossi is therefore the first that depicts the Molo Nuovo, still under construction. His model, even if Rossi appears less precise, is the large view of Baratta from 1637, which he updates. The engraving, in fact, presented only the new fortification, but not yet the Molo Nuovo, began in 1638 and joined with the cliff of the Lanterna Promontory only after 1651. The novelty of these latest views is that they move the point of view slightly towards the new Molos and lowered it in order to magnify the dimension of the Molo Nuovo and its architecture, severe and resistant. From the prototype of Baratta de Rossi also derives the image printed by Mortier, which presents finally the Molo Nuovo completed. It should be noted that in both the print of Baratta and Mortier, in addition to exaggerating the width of the Strade Nuove, are well underlined the most important areas with villas, such as San Pier d'Arena, in both underlined as sites of delights with beautiful palaces and garden, loco de delizie con bellissimi palazzi e giardini. A strategy that one of magnifying also the surroundings of the city with their villas, that was also considered in literature, as we will see shortly, as a further feature that, although belonging to the sphere of private aristocracy, contributes to making great the city on the international scene and to strengthen its wealth. Characteristic that will remain even when the city image is well consolidated, as Ennio Polleggi underlined, as in the case of that one designed by Friedrich Werner and engraved by Johann Ringel at the middle of the 18th century, even if it's dressed up with German clothes. It will be then the works of Francesco Maria Cinelli and Antonio Giolfi, edited in 1769, to definitely consecrate that image of the city and its harbor seen from the sea. For a conclusion, we can also see as the creation of Cyclopean construction are also celebrated in the literary works of Genoese writers. In the context of the wide production of the first half of the 17th century, in fact, stands out the Rosalinda, the work of Bernardo Morando, a member of the Accademia degli Addormentati, published in Piacenza in 1750. Here the author, in line with the ideas of the Novatori, alongside the exaltation of the concept of negoziazione, so different from the banal mercatura, presents other fundamental ideas such as the tranquility and the unity of the territory of the Republic. He presents also the power and the monumentality of the city and of its public and private works, and above all, of those villas and surroundings. That surroundings where Anton Giulio Brignole Sale sets is Le stabilità dell'ingegno, a celebration of a pacified Genoa published in 1635. So, in the name of a rediscovered unity between public and private for the benefit of the power of the Republic, the Rosalinda described palaces, streets, churches, and villas, literary images that, as we have just seen, are finding concreteness in the views of the city just already together. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sara. Very interesting paper. You showed very well how the Republicisti, this navalistic project, political project, perfectly matches with this construction of the new walls and of mostly this new harbor, and how relevant it was the architectural reconstruction of these key points of the city of Genoa, such as the harbor and the walls, for a new conception, a political relaunch of the Republic of Genoa, and how this condition also the new vision of the city, not only inside Genoa, but also outside. So it was very interesting. Thank you also, Gregory mentioned one of the texts which are really important to face the Republican discourse in 17th century Genoa, such as L'instabilità dell'ingegno by Anton Giulio Brignole Sale. Would like to speak a little bit about Brignole Sale, which unfortunately we don't have a paper directly on him, but I think that he's a very key figure also on the political side. So thank you very much, Sarah. I think we will have a lot of questions. And now we can go to our last, but not least, paper of the second day of the conference. That is that of Giacomo Montanari, who is member of the scientific committee of this conference and among the organizers. Giacomo is currently a research fellow at the University of Genoa, where he received his PhD in 2014, with a thesis on the librarian and artistic collecting in 16th and 17th century Genoa. He has been postdoctoral fellow at the Fondazione 1563 per l'Arte e la Cultura in Turin and at the University of Insubria. He has published several works on the 16th and 17th century librarian collections, but also on the early modern Genoese painting and sculpture. He collaborates with many prestigious institutions to the valorization of the Genoese artistic heritage, and he is currently scientific curator of the events of valorization of the World Heritage UNESCO Center of Genoa, Palazzo dei Rolli. When we first programmed this conference in 2019, we imagined at the conclusion of these 2 days of conference, a visit of one of these beautiful Genoese Baroque palaces conducted by Giacomo. Unfortunately, the pandemic crisis forced us to change our programs, but we still want you to enter, even if only virtually, these wonderful artistic sites. So Giacomo today will give us a paper titled Research and Dissemination, a Digital Visit.
C'è sul tavolino di Giuseppe.
Palazzo dei Rolli, UNESCO World Heritage. I just ask you to loud the microphones.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Giacomo.
Thank you so much. I apologize, it's not really a paper, but only a presentation. I will show you some slides and then we will go to the video, like an evocation of the real guided tour into the Rolli Palaces. So, first of all, I want to thank Alessandro Metlica and Enrico Zucchi for this involvement in this important conference. And I would also like to thank all the colleagues who spoke previously and who will present their papers tomorrow for providing new research lines and new perspectives on the cultural landscape of Genoa. My speech today is, as I said, unscheduled because it's not a real research project. Because as Enrico was saying, if the conference had been held in more traditional forms, I would have physically accompanied you inside some of the most extraordinary of the aristocratic palaces that now constitute the UNESCO site of the Strade Nuove and Palazzi dei Rolli. You can see something about that here in the slides. Here, unfortunately, we have to settle for a digital visit. However, this is a precious opportunity to tell about a project in which the University of Genoa has contributed with its skills to give life to a new way of bringing people to these unique sites in the world. The creation of video content to tell the story of cultural heritage is not a novelty itself. However, it is, at least as far as we have seen in the Italian panorama, to be able to do so while maintaining that level of scientific care, quality of information and ease in dissemination that for the past 10 years has distinguished the success of the events dedicated to the Rolli Palaces, which saw over 1.5 million people coming across their doors over 44 days of opening. I will therefore present 2 videos made for the October event, subtitled in English. One tells of the birth of the Palazzi dei Rolli system with some simplification due to the necessary adaptation of the format, and the second describes one of the palaces in particular, Palazzo de' Mari. This method of digital visits allowed, in the 3 days dedicated to October to the events linked to the UNESCO site, to reach over 600,000 users, while in the Rolli Days Digital Week, held in May during the lockdown, the individual users involved were over 1 million. However, I do not want to take any more time to speak, but I want to switch to the video, and I hope you will enjoy what you will see. I hope it will work, and we can get it started. How about the audio? You can.
No, we cannot hear the audio now.
Why? I don't know why. So we can stop sharing and I do another share, hoping it will work better.
Very, very low.
You can hear because.
See? Yes.
No.
The audio of the video, no.
No, I can only see the video. I cannot hear the audio.
Passo che aveva portato l'antico e litigioso comune genovese a trasformare un attore di primo piano della scena internazionale fu l'ammiraglio Andrea Doria. Intraprendente uomo d'armi e spregiudicato politico, Andrea capì che in Europa stava cambiando tutto e che la sconfitta di Francesco I di Francia a Pavia nel 1525 e il successivo sacco di Roma del 1527 non erano altro che il preludio al dominio di Carlo V d'Asburgo. Con lui il Doria strinse immediatamente un contratto che garantiva allo stesso modo la continuità dell'indipendenza di Genova e il suo appoggio alla Spagna. Le fonti, anche alcuni affreschi, ci raccontano che Andrea Doria rinunciò alla signoria della città che pure gli era stata offerta proprio qui, nella curia della sua famiglia, nella piazza dei Doria, dominata dall'antica chiesa gentilizia di San Matteo. Ma Andrea è importante anche per un'altra ragione. Nonostante il rifiuto di un ruolo ufficiale, la sua autorevolezza era tale che quando l'imperatore venne di persona a ratificare l'alleanza con Genova nel 1533, attraccò qui, nel porto privato del sontuoso palazzo che il Doria si era fatto costruire alle porte della città. Una villa straordinaria, affrescata da Perino del Vaga, allievo di Raffaello, e decorata negli anni da scultori incredibili come Giovannangelo Montorsoli e Silvio Cosini, allievi diretti di Michelangelo Buonarroti. Andrea Doria, con le sue importanti competenze artistiche, aveva dunque creato un vero e proprio paradigma del ruolo che il sistema palazzo, con le sue importanti decorazioni pittoriche, avrebbe avuto all'interno degli equilibri della spartizione del potere degli aristocratici della superba nei secoli a venire. Nel 1622, infatti, il diplomatico e pittore fiammingo Pietro Paolo Rubens pubblicava in Anversa un grande libro illustrato e dedicato proprio ai palazzi di Genova. Quelli descritti da Rubens all'inizio del Seicento non sono altri che i palazzi riconosciuti dall'UNESCO come patrimonio dell'umanità nel 2006 e che noi tutti oggi chiamiamo i palazzi dei Rolli. Ma che cosa sono i palazzi dei Rolli? Beh, si tratta di un vero e proprio sistema di residenze private che erano però destinate a una funzione pubblica, cioè quella dell'ospitaggio, dell'accoglienza, potremmo dire, delle personalità straniere che venivano a Genova in visita di Stato. Rolli non vuol dire altro che ruoli, elenchi, una enumerazione di quei siti che per qualità architettonica, per il prestigio delle decorazioni pittoriche e delle grandi collezioni artistiche, erano ritenuti idonei a ricevere nelle proprie stanze ambasciatori, principi, vescovi e signori provenienti da ogni angolo della terra. Questo sistema unico, nato nel 1576, si rendeva necessario vista la singolare forma di governo della città di Genova. Una repubblica il cui potere era depositato nelle mani di una ricca aristocrazia che faceva della speculazione finanziaria la chiave di un successo di portata mondiale. La rapida e subitanea salita nella scala sociale della nobiltà europea spinse i genovesi a dotarsi di questi nuovi e stupefacenti palazzi, attorno a cui l'intera città assunse una nuova, formidabile fisionomia. I palazzi dei Rolli divengono quindi una manifestazione fisica della complessità di una società straordinariamente ricca, che seppe esprimere la sua natura e il suo potere anche attraverso questi edifici, per il tramite della realizzazione di incredibili affreschi, e con l'accumulo senza pari in Europa delle collezioni d'arte più incredibili che si potessero immaginare. All'apice del suo successo, alla fine del Cinquecento, questo sistema di palazzi arrivò a contarne oltre 100, ed erano tutti concentrati, pensate, all'interno della cerchia muraria della città. Quello dei palazzi dei Rolli è ancora oggi un sistema unico al mondo. Un'unicità tale, sotto il punto di vista finanziario, politico e anche culturale, che spinse un grande studioso, lo storico Fernand Braudel, a scrivere che Genova, tra il 5 e il 600, sembrava essere il luogo dove l'impensabile diventava possibile, una città in cui accadevano veri e propri miracoli. La forza e l'influenza di Genova si spandevano in quegli anni su tutto il mondo conosciuto. 100 anni straordinari per l'Europa, che non potevano che essere ribattezzati il secolo dei genovesi. Ottavio Imperiale ha dato principio a una fabbrica parte in campetto e parte in Sozziglia, dove ha di spesa 50.000 scudi. Queste sono le parole che usa l'aristocratico e letterato genovese Giulio Pallavicino per descrivere quello che nel 1586 è per Genova l'evento dell'anno, cioè la costruzione del palazzo che oggi conosciamo come Palazzo del Melograno. L'edificio, che è progettato da un capodopera poco noto, Jacopo de Aggio, è così grandioso e monumentale che ancora in fase di costruzione, nell'anno 1588, viene però incluso nella lista dei palazzi dei Rolli, sebbene per evidenti ragioni non ai livelli più alti dello stitaggio. Ma la sua imponenza porta Pietro Paolo Rubens ad includerlo nel suo volume dedicato ai palazzi di Genova, pubblicato ad Anversa nel 1622. Per quanto collocato non nelle aree più esclusive della città, rappresentate da Strada Nuova e da Strada Balbi. È proprio la lista dei Rolli a testimoniarci il primo, importantissimo passaggio di proprietà del palazzo. Nel 1614, infatti, esso compare come residenza di un altro Ottavio, questa volta appartenente alla famiglia Sauli. È questa la famiglia che contribuisce maggiormente alla decorazione del palazzo, in particolare nell'allestire in queste sale una mirabolante quadreria. Grazie agli interessi di Giovanni Antonio Sauli sulla piazza di Roma, infatti, arriva a dipingere a Genova per le sue sale uno dei pittori più importanti del primo Seicento, Orazio Gentileschi. Dalle pareti del palazzo di Campetto, infatti, pendevano alcuni dipinti straordinari, realizzati a Genova proprio per il Sauli. Uno su tutti, la meravigliosa Danae, partita da Genova nell'Ottocento e acquistata dal Getty di Los Angeles pochi anni fa, per l'astronomica cifra di 30 milioni di dollari. Ma il gusto aggiornato dei Sauli non si ferma affatto qui. Teresa Spinola Sauli, forse per celebrare il matrimonio del giovanissimo figlio Lorenzo con una lontana cugina che avrebbe quindi riunificato i due rami dell'aristocratica famiglia, chiama a realizzare una incredibile scultura di Ercole vincitore con i pomi delle Esperidi, lo scultore più aggiornato e innovativo di tutta la Repubblica. Si tratta di Filippo Paroni, il Bernini di Genova, uno degli artisti più aggiornati e innovativi del tempo. L'Ercole di Parodi è una scultura muscolare e potente, esemplata sul grande dipinto di analogo soggetto, eseguito da Rubens per i Gentile e che si trovava a Genova, per quanto oggi sia conservato a Torino, alla Galleria Sabauda. Allo stesso tempo l'artista mette nel marmo quella carica esplosiva e vivace, tipica di chi si è formato lavorando materiali più malleabili, come il legno. La pelle del leone si avvolge attorno al corpo dell'eroe, forma anse, tesse ombre profonde, evidenzia con il suo andamento trasversale una decisa opposizione alla verticalità di Ercole. Il marmo si fa carne massiccia nei muscoli di Ercole, pelle squamosa nel drago ladone, ispido pelo nella pelle del leone di Nemea e perfetta rotondità nei pomi d'oro delle Esperie. Parodi metamorfizza la materia, seguendo da vicino gli esiti più alti della scuola romana del Verdino. Ma questi sono anche gli anni in cui il palazzo si ricopre di una decorazione permanente. Questi spazi, queste pareti, queste volte che avevano fino a quel momento goduto di eccezionali cromie che però derivavano dalle collezioni pittoriche che erano state conservate in questi spazi, ricevono una straordinaria decorazione d'affresco. L'interprete di questa nuova stagione nell'ultimo quarto del Seicento è il pittore barocco genovese Domenico Piola, che qui nello spazio più importante, cioè la galleria che corre attorno al cortile centrale, allestisce uno straordinario spettacolo mitologico. È quella che noi oggi chiamiamo la Galleria dei Pianeti. Quella che Piola allestisce è una decorazione pienamente barocca, dove il pittore conferisce allo spazio una scansione continua, raffigurando in ogni volticella un'allegoria astrologica, fatto che ha contribuito a far ribattezzare questo luogo straordinario la Galleria dei Pianeti. Questo tema, così particolare che ricorda una sorta di oroscopo, potrebbe ben caratterizzarsi in effetti con il già citato matrimonio di Lorenzo Sauli. Le gallerie venivano spesso utilizzate per comunicare temi augurali, come ben insegnano gli esempi della Roma del primo Seicento. A maggior conferma di questo significato chiaramente positivo concorrono le figure delle arti che Piola evoca nelle loro tipiche immagini allegoriche. Abbiamo la pittura col pennello e la tavolozza, la musica che suona uno strumento a corda, l'architettura che sta tracciando su un grande foglio un progetto e poi forse come figura più importante di tutto questo ciclo la scultura, perché la scultura sta traendo dalla pietra proprio lo stemma della famiglia Sauli. Ma gli auspici, per quanto buoni e favorevoli, non possono proteggere dalla cattiva sorte. Nel 1684, appena ventenne, Lorenzo muore e quello è peraltro anche l'anno in cui la città subisce il terribile bombardamento ad opera della flotta francese. È così che il palazzo passa per via ereditaria a Niccolò de' Mari, che lo lascia a un giovane erede, nato proprio nel 1685, che si chiama anch'esso Lorenzo, ma portando questa volta il cognome della nuova famiglia di proprietari, i de' Mari, che allo stesso modo dei Sauli lasciano su questo palazzo clamorose e importanti tracce decorative. Nel 1730 viene chiamato a lavorare in questo palazzo un importante artista savonese, Domenico Guido Bono, che proprio pochi anni prima era stato attivo nell'importante cantiere torinese di Palazzo Madama. Ma il linguaggio di Guido Bono è già pienamente diverso da quello di Domenico Piola. La sua è una grazia completamente settecentesca e totalmente intrisa già della leziosità del rococò. Ecco che le finte sculture allora danzano tra le pareti e la volta della galleria a fingere il marmo, lo stucco e straordinari elementi decorativi. Una grazia ed un decoro che emergono con forza anche da un'eccezionale scultura coeva, che solo i recenti restauri hanno permesso di riscoprire. Si tratta della Madonna della Misericordia, eseguita da Francesco Maria Schiaffino entro la metà del Settecento e che mostra in 3 dimensioni tutte le attitudini che abbiamo potuto riscontrare nelle pitture del piano nobile. In questo grazioso pregadio, una sorta di altare privato davanti al quale la famiglia poteva riunirsi per la Santa Messa negli spazi del proprio palazzo, Schiaffino celebra tutti i valori più alti della scultura genovese del Settecento, che gli varranno come artista riconoscimenti a livello europeo e mondiale, dalla Spagna al Portogallo alle Americhe. alla fase che vede i demari come proprietari del palazzo, devono essere poi fatti risalire tutta una serie di cicli ad affresco che vanno a popolare le volte di diversi salotti. Qui a dipingere è uno dei principali pittori foresti, cioè non genovesi, che si radicano a Genova nella prima metà del Settecento. Si tratta infatti di Giacomo Antonio Boni, un artista forse di non eccezionale livello tecnico, ma dalla grande prolificità e facilità inventiva. A lui tocca raffigurare la gloria di uno degli illustri antenati del casato, quell'Ansaldo de' Mari, che aveva ricoperto il ruolo di ammiraglio nella flotta imperiale nel XIII secolo, sotto Federico II di Svevia. Il suo volto, incorniciato in una sorta di icona, è portato a volo da uno stormo di putti, mentre virtù e divinità marine ne ricordano la forza e il dominio sul mare. Allo stesso modo, l'intero casato dei De Mari viene glorificato e celebrato sulla volta di un salottino attivo. Qui, a fianco a un uomo d'armi che rappresenta allegoricamente l'intera famiglia aristocratica, si accompagna addirittura l'iconografia della Liguria. Questa allegoria è resa ben riconoscibile per l'occhio della vigilanza posto sul palmo della mano, l'elmo calzato in capo e il timone, simbolo della marineria, stretto in mano. Dagli imperiali che investirono un vero e proprio capitale in questo palazzo, portandolo immediatamente a un livello così alto da essere degno di comparire nei rolli degli allungamenti pubblici della Repubblica di Genova, ai Sauli, che ne fecero vivere gli spazi prima grazie ai pennelli del Gentileschi, e poi dedicando il marmo del Parodi e gli affreschi di Viola alla speranza di un futuro radioso della propria casata, poi tragicamente spezzato, per arrivare ai De Mari, che seppero intrecciare la grazia del Settecento con Schiaffino e Guido Bono e il sempreverde orgoglio familiare. Il Palazzo di Campetto rimane oggi a ricordarci oltre 400 anni della storia della Superba e l'importanza di saper leggere questi straordinari manufatti che attraverso i documenti, gli oggetti artistici, gli elementi pittorici e architettonici raccontano le vicende di una potente aristocrazia tra le prime in Europa. Ma perché questo palazzo si chiama ancora oggi Palazzo del Melograno? Beh, narra una leggenda, perché soltanto di leggenda possiamo parlare, che uno dei proprietari durante il XIX secolo, con il vizio del gioco, avesse perso tutto, anche la sua sontuosa dimora, in una disastrosa mano a carte. Ma ricordatosi di possedere ancora una piccola pianta di melograno e puntando quella, una volta che la fortuna era tornata ad assisterlo, fosse stato in grado di riconquistare tutto il suo patrimonio. E allora, una volta tornato in possesso anche del palazzo, l'avesse piantata sopra la porta d'ingresso, dove si trova ancora oggi a protezione della sua casa.
So, a very divulgative way of speaking about our UNESCO palaces, but I think that in some cases it can be a way to get involved a lot of people into these very complex teams, and I want to thank you for your attention, and I give back the floor to Enrico.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. I think that is a wonderful way to involve people, and the outstanding, really crazy numbers of people participating to this initiative that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation. Over 1 million of visualization in the lockdown period confirms the relevance of this kind of initiative, and I think that they are really useful to approach for everyone this kind of topic.
Enrico, just let me say to Giacomo, thank you. Of course, it is not as good as an actual visit, but better than nothing, and it's really nice. So thank you once again. And I also would like to thank you, Giacomo Comiati, who has translated these subtitles in order to make the videos available. But the videos really were really nice. I mean, of course, it's not like being in Genova right now, but at least a little touch of Genoese atmosphere to this conference. So
I can give you, so thank you very much, Alessandro, and I can give you some links to share to all the people attending the conference to see a lot of video that we produced, so to have an idea of staying in Genova, even staying abroad or in other cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This video encourages us to come to Genoa again when it will be possible. So let's open the discussion. I think we have already some questions. You can write in the chat or just raise your hand. Maybe Simona, if you are already connected, you can make your note. I've seen that you have written that you are going.
Here. No, but I have to go really quickly. No, I'm very happy for this afternoon, really. No, the only thing that I want to suggest to Sarah, normally we can talk at the cafe in Via Balbi, but now it's not possible to do it. So I only want to suggest her the little pamphlet by Luca Sarino I've written in the chat, because
Yes,
it's a particular text that was committed by the institution. So the Doge and the Senato asked for this oration, but Asarino wrote a very peculiar text against the power. So it's another point of view for your. I don't know if you mentioned it because I was listening very slow, but it was low. But it's a suggest for you.
Thank you very much, Simona. Very interesting.
So I'm sorry, but I have to go. I'm very grateful for this afternoon.
thank you, Simona.
Thank you, Simona.
Bye.
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 So now we have a question from Laura Stagno and then Davide Ferri.
Yes, first of all, I have to see as a Genoese and on behalf of all my Genoese colleagues, we all expect you in Genoa sooner or later when it's possible to see the palace directly in person, though the video by Giacomo are very, very nice, of course. So I have a very specific question for Professor Gord. Thank you very much, George, for your interesting presentation. Out of interest for the Mexican Guadalupe, Virgin of Guadalupe, a copy of which was commissioned, one of the very first to reach Italy in the 17th century by Violante Lomellini Doria for her chapel. I would like to have some information, if possible, on that very intriguing Japanese triptych, its genesis, its assemblage or date, if something more is known about it. I find it a really fascinating object. Thank you.
Yes, there was a talk about 4 or 5 years ago at the Getty Research Institute by a person, an American, who was writing a dissertation on the Pacific Ocean. And this was on the cover of the talk. And I went, oh my God, look at this. This is absolutely a miracle.
Yes,
and,
it's unusual.
I unfortunately could not go to the talk. But I need to look her name up, but I don't know whether it's published. I have no more information on it, but it's just something I grabbed. I took, from this, and I need to find her name, and I need to chase this reference down because it was
any clue. I find it really fascinating because of this mixing of different areas of the world, different cultures, and so on.
Yeah, she was talking about from Manila into Peru, the silver trade, and again, sort of trying to bring the Atlantic and Pacific together, on this. And this was just something was astounding to me.
Yes, because it's really emblematic of the of the whole world circulation of this kind of.
It really is. So this was a dissertation that she was writing, so I need to look it up, and I'll get that reference to you, Laura, because it is so interesting, and I should have done this already.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You are very kind.
It's so fascinating. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So Davide Ferri, please.
Yes, thank you to all the speakers. It was wonderful, especially, of course, also the Rolli. I would have a question to Professor Gors. And my questions relates to the devotional agency of the Mary as the Queen of the Republic. Did this iconography develop some kinds of a devotional cult, or is it a real cult image, like, for example, Guadalupe? And this is a point that today's Rosser and Jane Garnett made in their book on devotional images in Liguria, I think 5 or 6 years ago, confronting or comparing it to the Madonna delle Vigne, for example, which is very important at the time, or Madonna della Fortuna, so other devotional traditions. And following up on this, maybe, and this could also go to Sara Rulli, this follow-up questions. I was always very, I always found it very interesting that the depiction of the city in Fiasella's paintings is extremely accurate and extremely precise. You can really identify almost the most important buildings, of course, streets and the city gates and the walls and so on. And it is, maybe it could be a bit strange that such a precise image of the city is in a sacred space at this time. So my question would be, I think that these images really develop a kind of epistemological agency, like showing the people how the city look like maps, of course. And I was just wondering, where would you locate this kind of visual practice, in a profane context, or maybe in a post-Tridentine tradition of city images, for example? And I'm thinking, of course, Paleotti, Carracci, and this whole tradition. But thank you to the three of you.
Sara, I don't know whether you want to go first, but it's when you're going through the ceremonial books, it is really remarkable how the Annunciation is commemorated now as a state sort of festival, commemorating the Mass, commemorating this proclamation of the Virgin Mary as Queen of the city. So when after 1637, the second ceremonial book of the Republic, you follow. It becomes a state ceremony with the Doge and the Collegi, and you see again an elevation of these again the Annunciation, but the Nativity of the Virgin Mary, the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary, the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, August the 15th. Those, particularly the Annunciation and the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, become two of the major ceremonies for the Doge and for the state of Genoa. And so in this way, it's a religious idea, but it's also very, again, a Dogo one. It has to do with the elevation of the Republic. And so the ceremony, I'm so happy that they're publishing the Libri Cerimoniali. This is a wonderful project. The first volume was in difficult condition in 2018, also need restauro, So this, I hope this goes on, the second and third and so forth. I have a lot of photographs from them, but over the years.
The idea is that, I don't know if they will succeed and find all the financial support they need, but the idea is to have a series of volumes, yes.
Well, good. Tell them to do a fundraising and give us a call, because we've got some money in the bank.
For sure. They will be very happy. I will, for sure.
Good, because this is so important. And these are some of the things that you see again about the ceremonial books are so interesting too, because they start talking about the resistance on the part of Urban VIII and Stefano Dorazzo to this idea and the positioning on the altar and everything else, where the Archbishop is, where the Doge is, all these conflicts. And this, in the Spanish and the French, refusal to come into the city sometimes because they don't want to recognize the kind of elevation of protocols. Here, from my studies, Ernst Kantorowicz, the two bodies of the king's two bodies. Kantorowicz is the classic for us, you know, for all of us, Adventus, you know, and the kind of protocols, again, the politics of this. And I still don't completely, this is a question from me to you all. I still don't completely understand why in 1633, 1653, 1649, 1653, they're commissioning a statue for the high altar of the cathedral. I still don't entirely understand how they resolved that conflict, you know. So if anyone has an idea on this, let me know, because Dorazzo is still Archbishop until 64. So again, but I think it's a kind of, and it's in rivalry with Venice, the marriage to the sea and things like this. You see this from the Middle Ages with the procession to the sea, or the John the Baptist Day and so forth. You know, it becomes again a rivalry with Venice in terms of a state kind of cult of the Virgin Mary now. And this is really so fascinating. Again, you know, so this kind of turn, monarchy and Repubblica. I don't know if that answers it, but I'm trying. Davide, grazie per la questione.
Yes, Sarah, if you want to answer now.
Yes, the painting of Fiasella is very, very accurate, and the question about the model of this picture, this relief, is very complicated. Ennio Poleggi thought that the model can be the big view of the gallery of the cartography in Vatican City, and probably is that the model of Fiasella. But we have to think that in this period, also for the renewal of the harbor, a lot of architects, cartographers are studying the form, the shape of the city, and so Fiasella probably was in contact with this group of workers. And I have also to think that first of Fiasella, there was the big view of Hogenberg, which was very, very detailed. And so Fiasella collected all this information, and on the basis of the model of the Vatican City, created this big view of the city of Genoa with the new walls.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now we have 3 questions. We can collect them. We have Matteo Casini first, then Arthur Waldstein, and then Laura again. Please, Matteo.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, George, in particular, for your very stimulating. Unfortunately, you touched the rivalry with Venice, and as I am from Venice, I'm sorry, you guys, but I have to tell you that we are far away superior than Genoa. I'm sorry for you. We defeated you in 1381, and that's all. Sorry. I know you like a little competition there, but I'm not sure about that, okay? But apart from this, very interesting. 3 brief comments. First of all, for George and Laura, I would recommend, as a comparative studies between Europe and the Latin America, the studies by Richard Trexler about the cult of the Magi's, the 3 kings in Mexico. They are very interesting, and they could be a parallel to your research in between Europe and Latin America. Second point is about the Black Virgin. Very interesting, George, that you're mentioning here. Of course, here in Venice, we have as well a huge cult of the Madonna Nicopeia, as you know better than me, since already the medieval times with the Madonna Nicopea in St. Mark, and then a new one actually at the end of the 17th century. You like the long periods, you know, the expanding to different images. Here we're talking about 300-400 years of celebration of the Black Virgin. So I think it's a very interesting, if you can start some comparative job. Third and last comments is about the doppio corpo del doppio corpo del sovrano, the double bodies of the king, as you were mentioning from S. Kantorowicz. I did some research on the double, as also at Muir. We did some research on the double bodies of the Doge of Venice. Is very interesting if you look in details at the ceremonial rites from the funerals to the coronation, and I think someone should do the same for Genova. I did it for Cosimo de' Medici as well, and I think the comparative analysis brought to a basic point, which actually recalling what we were saying yesterday. The ceremonies of these little states that Venice and Florence cannot completely imitate the huge ceremonies in France and England. Why? Once again, the same as we were saying yesterday, because the Italian cities have a derived power. It's not a direct power from God, but is always a second level power. And this is actually reflected in the ceremonies with the double Doge. And this is bringing me to this reflection about this introduction of the Virgin. It's very interesting, also compared to Venice. But my question is, George, do you think that this new association with the Virgin in the first half of the 17th century had certainly some reflection on this idea of looking for a royalty, as we were saying yesterday? Yeah. But as in the case of Venice, we have been discussing a lot this recently in Venice, there is also an imperial idea behind that, or just royal, or we can actually shift to an imperial idea, a new imperial idea for Genoa. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think, immediately you bring in Van Dyck's portraits. You also bring in Rubens' The Palazzi di Genova, 1622, published in Antwerp, as you know. This is for Giacomo, Montanari too. The palazzi are noble palaces. And in the introduction by Rubens, he says, there are royal palaces and there are sort of a lower class, there are these these middle level palaces for nobilities. And these are models for them, So between the portraits, and this is interesting, 1620s and 30s, to look at this, the portraits, the palaces, and this iconography, that again comes from a cleric. It's a clerical idea that suggested to the Republic, and then becomes a state iconography. It is so interesting because it anticipates, sort of Louis XIV and the idea of divine right of kings. And so I think Genoa has such an important place here for the idea of nobiltà and the sumptuary and everything else, of course, and that's well known. But I think you put it all together as a context for the Savoy War to the 1637, that whole, the 1620s and 30s, and the debate, of course, within the Republic itself, that, historians at, Rodolfo Civelli and with Carlo Bertossi and everyone that you've been talking about, I think is so interesting because for me, my studies, when I was in graduate school, we were studying Hans Baron, The Crisis of the Italian Renaissance, and the debate between Republic and Empire in Rome, within the Florentine humanists. And so this resonates for me. This is about Cato on the one side and Augustus on the other side. And this is something that Laura and I and Yanni and Elena, have been talking about. Suetonius's Life of Augustus becomes like a screenplay for Andrea Doria. This is a savior of the Republic, who is sumptuary, he reforms the Republic, and all of the things that sort of, while creating a very imperial kind of regime, it's still a republic. It anticipates, again, I think, so this is, you go from Andrea Doria to Agostino Pallavicino for me. This goes from 1528 through the reform of 75, 76, and to 1620s and 30s. We haven't talked a lot about old and new nobles here as well, and I think that is, of course, another part of this whole story. But and Alessi, of course, is so important here, as Sara is pointing out. I mean, you go from Alessi and the Moho and gates right through to the redesign of the walls and the Moho together, in the 1630s. This is really important.
If I want to add just one little thing, it's not very known outside Venice. I don't know why, but the discussion between Republic and Empire, who we should follow in the 15th century, is actually going on in Venice too, in some writers like Lauro Querini, something the Baron and other people did not consider at the time. But the same debate is going on in Venice as well.
Yeah. No, Eduardo Grendi is so important here. I mean, in the 70s, in the archive, 75, when I was first in Genoa, there was Grendi, there was Pileggi, Giacomo Musso was right there. These were the people that you got, indications from and you learned from. They're all here. They're all here with us. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now, Arthur, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Gors. Actually, I would like to continue this discussion on republics and empires and mention another name in the series of scholars after Hans Baron and Ernst Kantorowicz. I was thinking about Francis Yates and the idea of Estrella, which I think has very much importance in the context of what you have been discussing, the Virgin Queen. That, of course, in the Genoese case is a Christian theme, but there's also this pagan classical connotation, which is also of importance when it comes to the figure of Augustus. Of course, Virgil writes about Estrella as the Virgin Queen that announces the coming of empire and the coming of a golden age. So I was thinking, is there any, for example, in the case of Andrea Doria or Pallavicini, is there a kind of Estrella connotation there as well? Or in other words, how would you put Genova into Francis Yates, her
Absolutely, Francis Yates, gosh, what a great book. What a great scholar, I wish I had met her. I wish I had seen her give a talk, that would have been amazing. Yeah, always the Doge is now the representative of the Virgin Mary. It's in terms of the rhetoric you see in the oration books and so forth, that now that the Doge receives the scepter and the keys and so forth from the Virgin Mary. The Doge is now the representative of the Virgin Mary, and I think as a male and of course with a female state iconography here, brilliantly, Elizabeth I, with all of the civil wars and everything else, takes it on herself, as the Estrella. She doesn't represent herself as the Virgin Mary, but here's Estrella, and so here's the goddess, the Virgin Goddess, Estrella. It takes some research, that's for sure, and that is an amazing move. And I wonder with, Catherine de' Medici, of course, it's a very complicated period. Marie de' Medici, of course, is developing a lot of the ideas here in the 1620s and 30s with Rubens' cycle that, Louis XIV are really inheriting as well. I think, Marie de' Medici is another one. So Francis Yates is certainly, and you brought up England before, and I think that Ditchley portrait that Dicely portrait just blows you away. I mean, it really, when you stand in front of that portrait, you just say, wow, that's really, that's chutzpah, man. That's chutzpah, you know, that's really something. Kate Blanchett, her film, her portrayal of Elizabeth I is really fantastic. I love that film. The end. Mask. Yeah, the gender. This gender iconography is so important as a central question. And the Doge represents the Virgin now. He doesn't cross-dress, but you know, he's a representative of the Virgin Mary.
Thank you very much. And we have
let me also mention one other thing, because it has occurred to me a couple of times. When you look at Evelyn and other descriptions of Genoa or other cities, so often they will finish the description with describing how the women dress in the city. And it literally is like, it's a trope. Now, the description of how women dress becomes a persona of the city in travel descriptions. And you see this in the 16th and 17th centuries. And I think that's another thing to think about here, you know, the kind of personification, along with the portraits and everything else.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting point in the end. Also for the Dutch Republic, we have the same kind of mechanism, the persona of the female character of the female people as a representation of the nation. So we have time for the last question by Laura.
Yes, just a brief comment. Referring to Davide Ferri's question, I'd like to share an impression of mine, but I'd like to compare notes with George, of course, regarding the devotion, the religious devotion to the Madonna Regina, the Virgin as Queen of Genoa. Because my idea, my impression is that while the Madonna delle Vigne, which before the invention of the Madonna Regina, was the most civic, the most official effigy in Genoa after it was made, of course, in 1616, the one that received the homage of the Doge and so on. But it also had a very clear, strong, popular devotion, meaning that private citizens brought offerings, jewels. There was a list of miracles performed by this statue, the Madonna delle Vigne. I don't think that the Madonna Regina di Genoa, with the invention of this iconography, which was so politically important, as we have all, as we all know, we all very well understand, I don't think it had a popular cult, a devotion, a religious popular devotion as the Madonna delle Vigne had before and persisted to have, because the Madonna delle Vigne went on even when it was in a way substituted by the Madonna Regina on the political arena. It still preserved its cult among the people and the performing of miracles and so on. I don't think there was a similar devotion towards the Madonna Regina. I think it was really political, at the political level, never gained this such a cult, such a number of devoted followers. But this is my impression. I wanted to ask if George shared this idea. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It is very true. I entirely agree with you. It should be in the paper. If it's published, it should be in, and I'll give you, obviously, and that statue, you look down the right-hand nave right into that chapel and that statue, and you see it also described in the ceremonial books where there are processions to Santa Maria della Vigne, as well as to the harbor front and to San Lorenzo and so forth. The Vigne is so important right there on the harbor front, next to Campetto and so forth. And I agree with you entirely, Laura. This is a popular cult. It's very, very strong. And this is a state iconography on the other side. It doesn't have the same kind of popular. And I think your point clarifies this in terms of the kind of balance between this kind of umbrella. I don't know whether to call it artificial, but it's a state promotion here on the one side, and on the other side, Santa Maria della Vigne. You know, and then the background too, of course, you've got Santa Maria di Castello and the bishop from the Middle Ages in San Lorenzo and San Siro. So you've got a medieval interesting situation there of the co-cathedrals. And then in the 17th century, how the Virgin Mary comes out here. The Chapel of the San Corso is right next to it, of course, in the right-hand nave of San Lorenzo. So the Virgin Mary is obviously there always, but the Santa Maria della Vigne is really the popular core of the cult. And then they're spread out, of course, in Liguria.
I'm glad you
had
the same.
Thank you for that point. Very important.
Thanks.
Very important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have also another last comment by Giacomo Montanari. If you want, Giacomo, please.
Thank you, Enrico, and thank you all. And only to share an opinion, because we have worked in those years with Sarah a lot about this link between the city, the physical city, and allegory and the self-representation of the aristocracy that is very linked, not only with images, but with the landscape. So this idea of a city under the protection of the Virgin Mary, but not only the sacred allegory with the Holy Baby and Et Regeos and so on, but the city is represented in this iconography. So I think that the sculpture by Bianco in San Lorenzo is really this connection between the political escamotage of the Mary, Queen of Genoa, and the idea of bringing the city into a new position, so an international position that can be in the stage of king, not only quote of the project, but I think that the original idea is made for do this kind of position of the. You know that I don't know if this is correct, but I think that can be a suggestion. The new iconography, the new role of Mary as a queen of the city was made to pass in the same level in the international ceremonial, how can I say, to stay in the same level of the kingdoms in the ceremony, international ceremony. So I think that this link, the city and the iconography, can be the real point. I think that is not a case of devotion, not at all. So
that's
devotion,
that's what we said. It's never
yes,
a matter of devotion.
yes,
It's absolutely political.
Yeah.
And the other political meaning is the use of, we have quoted a lot of times of Columbus and old glories of the families that have to create a real background to stay in a European level, because the Genoese aristocracy have to create a great past to stay in that level from 1528. So when they become an aristocracy at the European level, even in economical way. Only to share this idea, because I agree with you, with all the talks that we heard in this afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Giacomo. I want to mention that we need to look at Torino, the fortifications of Torino. And the House of Savoy, the studies on Torino and fortress architecture. This is in competition with Torino directly. And so, you know, there are several scholars who've worked a lot on Torino, but here, Jeffrey Simcox right here at UCLA and others, on Torino, and of course the Torinese scholars. Because again, this is another one of those elements. In iconography, there's the Sindone and other things, but I don't know about the iconography of Torino and with Genoa, but certainly with the fortifications, the comparison to Torino is very important.
If I may, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry about that. I just wanted to react to what Giacomo said, because of course I'm not an expert on the Genoese culture and iconology, so I don't want to say anything that I don't know properly, but that's very interesting, I think, because if we look really in a comparative way to what's happened in Venice, for example, things are pretty different, as been said today, and I really thank all our speakers. We have this figurative process already happening, and even in the 15th century, and then of course in the 16th century, it's already fixed with Veronese and Tintoretto in Palazzo Ducale. So that what really struck me here as an expert on early modern Venice and not Genoa is that the process is really different, both in terms of forms and chronology. We also have this very interesting relationship with the Genoese nations, and that's something also Professor Herrero Sánchez discussed yesterday, because we know that the paintings are realized, I'm talking of course of Piazzella paintings are realized for Genoese nations in Naples and Palermo, and we have this very early cases of personification of Genoa and Antwerp, maybe conditioned or influenced by the Flemish culture. And what really struck me is that the process is completely different, but at the end, as has been said today, the purpose is quite the same, to have a figure that can represent the power in the same way that the king's body or the queen's body can do in a monarchic context. And of course, to represent Maria de Medici as Astrea, or even as the Virgin Mary, because one of the last paintings of Rubens really suggests a sort of, of divinization of the queen, or the queen mother. So that's, of course, that's impossible in the Republican context. So different ideas are developed. And the fact that such different processes in Genoa and Venice in the 17th centuries converge to the same purpose is something really significant. And I thank you, because I didn't know quite well all this process as far as Genoa is concerned, but today I really have learned a lot about that. So thank you once again for all your papers.
Alessandro, if I could just mention too, in the ceremonial books, there are certain mentions of the Doge's wives and their visits to other houses. There's one that sticks in my mind where a Doge's wife, and I don't know if the Dogoressa is a real title here, goes to see Durazzo over in the Archivescovo's palace, and you sort of to make a social call. And this is during a time of conflict. And so, like the Venetian Dogoresse studies, we need to think about the Dogoresse in Genoa and what roles they had beyond the marriage alliances and everything else, the political roles that they had. And I know, with Uso de Mare and Andrea Doria, Uso de Mare, she was corresponding with a lot of people. You see it in the Simancas archives. And these women had very active roles, and many of you are immersed in documents. This is something to really think about on the Dogoresse of Genoa. This is something really to think about, along with the noble women, obviously so prominent, front and center. Outside of family, politica, the politica della Dogoresse e I nobili. Le donne.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. So after this second day of conference, we have a knowledge how all these artistic, literary, architectural representation of the Republican state power have really concrete implication on the field of politics, of ceremonials, of diplomacy. The question of the precedenze is linked to the problem of the royalty that today we have so largely discussed. So this led us to the third day of conference, so tomorrow, which will begin with the diplomatic session, and a session on Genoa seen from the outside and represented for the foreigners. So thank you very much for this wonderful discussion, for these wonderful papers. We are really happy of what is going on, and see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the third and last day of the conference. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Goodbye. Thank you to all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.